Yo, 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 Salaam nerds. It's your boy Neebz, aka Watch with Neebz, and I'm here with my co-host Jazz, aka Jazz with nine Z's.
What?
Yeah, when you're sleepy, these are meant to
Disease.
represent the sleep, right?
Oh
Right?
my god, Neebs.
Um, and that's a great way to segment into today's podcast, which is about the Sandman. You ready, Jazz?
I'm ready. I know we're a
Oh,
little late on the Sandman, but we had
this
this month has been weird, man. Like just nonstop content. We're behind on everything. I feel like we're like behind on Cobra Kai as well, and like a couple other random things here and there. Like,
I
but
know.
we'll get
There's
through
there
it. Promise.
There's so much content, man. There's so much content. It's hard to cover all of it. But good thing we covered The Bachelor. That was apparently on our priority list. So
God damn it! Of all the things you could have covered, right? Like,
that's the only thing we were never behind on.
oh, it was the
Uh,
worst.
that's the worst. But you know what's not the worst? Our guest this week. Yay!
Hmm.
So we got a guest. You're probably one of our furthest guests because I don't think we've ever got a guest from across the pond before. So we would like to introduce you guys to Livy. Livy, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Livy. I'm a VFX production coordinator and just an all-around massive nerd. I don't really know what else to say about myself, but yeah, I'm from the UK. I live in London. It's quite late at night for me right now, but I'm very happy to be here.
Yo,
Thank
look
you
at
for being
that
here.
dedication, right? The dedication to be up at night. But I think Livy is a little too modest because I've seen her all over TikTok going viral all the time, talking about the coolest stuff about visual effects, uh, shutting down people when they're shitting on graphic designers because they don't know what they're talking about. I see her schooling people. I've seen her on TikTok
Hmm.
making waves. She is being much too modest. She knows so much about graphics and special effects and just all around media in general. So I want to hype her up, make sure she's. The British people are known to be modest, so I wanted to definitely make sure that you aren't selling yourself short.
Oh God. Thank you.
No, no problem, not from. And our next guest, someone you might recognize, someone who we had on one of my favorite episodes where we talked about corporate leadership using the Avengers, which I thought was super cool. I still can't get out of my brain how you convinced me that Star-Lord is a better leader than Tony Stark. I don't know but you did. But you did. You
It works.
that is solid. But thanks again for coming on the show, Sly.
Absolutely, very happy to be here. I'm actually very excited to be here with a real visual effects artist because I do have some questions about Netflix and what's called the Netflix look. I don't know if anybody knows about this, but a lot of Netflix shows look the same to me. So we might have a question about that from me about
Ooh.
this. So really excited to be here, and I love Sandman. We can talk about the show too. Looking forward to it, and I feel old now thinking about how long ago it was since I read the comics. So very excited
Yeah.
to be here.
No, both of our guests this week are huge guests. I mean, sorry, not huge guests, huge fans of the Sandman.
They're
But
huge in their own right. Actually. they're,
exactly, in
they're
their own right.
amazing people. Yeah.
No. But like I didn't know too much. I've read like a comic back in the day. I forgot about it. I knew how popular it was. I knew definitely how popular it was. Um, but that's really all to the extent of what I knew. So a lot of this stuff I don't know what's actually covered in the comics, what isn't. So it was all fresh to me. Like I watched this with a fresh pair of eyes, and it was super exciting, and I really enjoyed uh, getting to experience it as someone because like when I watch Marvel and stuff, like kind of have an idea. Like I read the comics, I know where they're going. I was completely blank on this, and I thought it was really, really great. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go around and talk about our initial views of the show without any spoilers. But then we will give you guys a warning, and that's when we'll start spoiling the entire season. So you have been warned.
Mhm.
All right, so let's start it off with Livy. Livy, tell us what your overall thoughts about the entire season.
Well, obviously, absolutely loved it. And it really felt like so much love and care had been put into bringing this adaptation to the screen because obviously, if anyone who's been a fan of Neil Gaiman for a long time has seen the various attempts of there being a Sandman adaptation and attempts that he has personally shut down himself, which I always find quite funny hearing about. He once read a script so bad that he was like, no, we're not doing this. Like, no, throw it away, kind of thing. I won't lie. So I was a bit worried at first when I literally like the first 5 minutes of the first episode, which I got to see on the big screen because I went to the premiere for it as well, which was like super cool. So
Wow.
saw the first
Ooh.
2 episodes on the big screen. And the first 5 minutes, I was like, "Oh God, is this actually going to be good?" I was so worried. But then, like the minute they introduced like Morpheus properly, in the situation that he was in the hamster ball, as people have started calling it, I was like, "Yeah, this is it. This is the one." Tom Sturridge just really carries throughout the entire show. And yeah, it's just such a faithful adaptation. And as someone who only started reading the comics like January last year, I was hooked on the comics and I was really excited for the show. And the fact I wasn't disappointed, like I was so happy to like be really thrilled with what they did with it. So yeah.
That's really cool. No, I can't believe you got to go to the premiere. That must have been really amazing. Like, how was that experience like? Just like going there and being part of something that you obviously are very passionate about.
It was really cool. It was kind of weird as well because I got to go with some people from work, which was
Mm.
nice. It wasn't like me being invited as an influencer, it was me being invited by like someone like my showrunner who's like mates with Neil. So that was fun, just sort of like sitting in on that Q&A with like the cast members that were there. They all have so much love for the show as well. So that like, you know, really translated as well on screen, and the fact that they're all passionate about it in real life just makes it so much better. And then I got to like meet some of them afterwards, which was like super cool. And everyone's just, yeah, I I still can't get over it. And it was like almost 2 months ago now.
That's cool. I love it when like the big fans of that particular thing get to go to experience all that stuff. Because a lot of times, like when me and Jath went to the Miss Marvel premiere, like there were a lot of people there that were, you know, they were Pakistani, there was influencers, but like they've never read a comic in their life. And you can tell because the entire theater was not laughing at any of the Marvel jokes. They were laughing at all of the cultural jokes, but none of like the Iron Man references or the Thor references. They were not getting it. And we're just like, this is so strange. So I'm glad that like they invite people who actually, you know, are passionate about this stuff. I think that's cool. Sai, what about you? What were your overall thoughts about this season?
So I really I enjoyed it quite a bit, and part of the enjoyment is that for a long time, people felt that the Sandman as a comic book to TV or movie adaptation, that it was impossible because the things that make Sandman really awesome are kind of tied into the medium of comic books, right? Like the art is incredible. The Dave McKean covers are wonderful. Colleen Duran puts together some of the greatest panels that's out there. And then Dream himself as a character is generally in the comic, he's pretty passive. So when you think of comic book heroes or superheroes of any kind, you think, yeah, this person's a man of action. They're going to take charge. And the stories in Sandman are not really like that, especially in the comic. They're really, sometimes they're meditations on what storytelling is. Sometimes they're meditations on things like death and the human condition. And it's really hard to translate that into an actual like TV show or a movie that has some, you know, dynamic action happening within it. But they struck a really good balance in this show. I think part of that is that they found a really good actor to play Dream. To play Morpheus, and that's Tom Sturridge, who kind of has this. He can really change the way that he appears as Morpheus from being, you know, very angry, visibly angry, and in fact, in some situations, looking very frightening to, you know, and then switching on a dime to kind of kindness and compassion. And that's one of the things that you can see in the comic book page, but it's really hard to translate into the show itself. I think they made some good choices in terms of how they remixed some of the stories and put that together. I think the other thing is you can see the production value in the show. You know, this show is always going to be heavy on visual effects. You're seeing a lot of things that you know don't really exist, but they did a really good job of getting that kind of dreamlike quality into the show. And so I've been following movie news about potential adaptations of you know, this story for a really long time. There was the closest thing that happened before this one was Joseph Gordon-Levitt was going to do this show. And now after watching Tom Sturridge, I can't even imagine what Joseph Gordon-Levitt's dream would be like. You know, would it be 500 days of dreaming? I'm not sure. I'm not really certain what it would be.
Wait. I got it. 500 days of slumber.
Slumber. There we go. Yeah, there we go. We need to crowdsource our puns as much as possible. But yeah, definitely. You know, I think he would have been really interesting choice. But I'm glad with who we got. The cast uniformly, I think, is very, very good. Boyd Kirkland, who plays the Corinthian, knocks it out of the park.
My favorite character. My favorite character in the whole thing.
There were too many people falling in love with the Corinthian because of Boyd Holbrook. Like, it's genuinely concerning. I'm like, guys, you gotta stop.
This is a nightmare. He's a serial killer.
You're falling in love with.
Falling in love wasn't part of the plan.
Neil Gaiman knew what was up. He's still very active on Tumblr. He knew what everybody wanted with this.
Oh, that's funny.
Dear God.
Jazz, what about you? What were your overall thoughts?
Okay. Cinematically, it was beautiful. I'm a big fan of the game Destiny, and we actually have a segment in the game called Dreaming. And when I saw the dreaming in the game and the dreaming here, I was like, oh, there may be some inspiration here, but we'll get into that a bit later. The other thing is that there was one very specific episode I'll talk about a bit later because I don't want to spoil it, right? It was the diner episode, and it was just masterfully done. And I was like, this is peak TV right here.
Yeah.
So I truly enjoyed every minute of this entire series. Oh, and the last episode with the cartoon cats, I was like, oh, cool. Like, that's really neat how they tied that in here. And like, just every little thing they did in the show is just perfect. And I'm very happy about it.
All right, I agree with everything you said except for the cast. I was not feeling the cast. I'm sorry.
Oh, everybody cancel Neebz.
Neebz, we're Muslim. We have to feel the cats. That's like
exactly.
I know. I like the story. It just took me too long to get there. I don't know. Oh, we'll see. Maybe you guys will convince me, and maybe I'll appreciate it in another perspective and give it a rewatch. Because I have been known to do that. I am not one of the people that has an opinion and sticks with it. If you give me a different perspective, I can appreciate it. But one thing that I actually did not know about this is that it's actually connected to some of the DC characters like Lucifer and Constantine, and that was really cool. And like, I had a tweet because like, I was like, wait a second, guys, is this a crossover or like, is this normal for them? I thought it was interesting. Liv, do you know anything about that?
Well, so yeah, obviously the Sandman comics are DC comics, and I think it was like, so Joanna Constantine in the show was John Constantine in the comics, but because of the fact DC had used John Constantine already, they had like a rights issue or something, and that's why he became Joanna Constantine in like the sort of like mainstream, and then I think Lucifer was like introduced first in Sandman before getting like his own spin-off. And then actually John Dee is Dr. Destiny in the DC comics, but they had to scrap that entire storyline because it wasn't actually DC doing it, because it was Netflix and Warner Brothers, not like DC and Warner Brothers. They had to take out like all the DC stuff basically. Otherwise it would have been like a mad sort of like rights issue. So it's not. So in comic book land, yes, it is kind of a crossover, but in Netflix land, it's not. They had to sort of stray from that entire thing. Otherwise, they would have had issues.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate because if they did tie it back in, this could have been a great springboard for DC coming back.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
DC's known to fumble the bag, so I'm not really surprised about that, which I think is really cool. But we are over 15 minutes into the show, so that means we're going to start spoiling stuff. So guys, you got our views of the show, you guys what we liked about it, we got some insight on it, but now we're going to actually go ahead and start recapping the episode. And if you do not like spoilers, it might be time to make like a tree and get the hell out of here.
What?
Back to the Future. You don't know that line?
That's how I got it. I'm just wondering why you brought that in here.
I'm going to go meet Michael J. Fox in 2 weeks, bro. Didn't I tell you that?
Oh no, you didn't.
Yeah, I bought the special Comic-Con whatever, like pay me a lot of money, you get to meet this person, nothing, whatever it
Got
is.
it. Okay.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
got
I
you.
got
Okay.
yeah. But it's a panel. They're having a panel discussion too. They're going to talk about the show and everything. It's going to be cool. So
Cool.
yeah. Also, everybody out there, if you are going to New York Comic Con, hit me up. We can make some TikToks. It'll be fun. All right. Let's get into the actual show. So the show starts off with the Sandman getting captured, and we see this
Hamster wall.
whole the hamster wall, right? Yeah, and we get to see all this up from there to the point where he escapes. Let's go into it because I thought it was really interesting. The first time I felt invested in the show is when the Raven died. I was like, oh no, the poor
Oh, that first
Raven.
Raven, yeah.
And they had me hooked from there. I'm like, I need to watch this. Livy, let's go into you and what your thoughts have how this started out. How quickly do you feel like you got a sense of the tone of the show?
Well, yeah, so obviously that little intro section with Dream narrating like what the dreaming is and what the waking world is, that like really kind of like, I think that was like a really good thing to do because it gave you, if you were a new viewer who had never read the comics, it gave you a really kind of like nice quick overview about what the show is kind of going to be about. And I thought that was quite a nice touch. But what really kind of like got me was like, firstly, Charles Dance as Roderick Burgess. There was no other person who could play that character. Like, you know, I just, when I read the comics and I knew about the adaptation like happening before they even like announced the cast, I was like, come on, Charles Dance has got to play this guy because there was no other person. But what really sold it for me is just the fact that Tom Sturridge did not say a single word that entire time. And you got bits and pieces of like his inner thoughts, his narration. You get a lot more of it like on the comic book pages. But it's the fact he just did so much with his eyes. And it's just his little micro expressions and the fact that he looked like he was on the verge of tears constantly. I mean, he kind of does that throughout the entire show. But just when he was in that little prison, just sitting there waiting patiently, there was something like so heartbreaking about it, like even more heartbreaking than when I saw it on like the page. So there was that, but also that first shot when they initially capture him and Morpheus is on the floor in the binding circle. That was a page like straight out of the comic books. It's like they were like, right, we're going to rip this out of the comic and just stick it on the screen. That's what that felt like. I remember audibly gasping when I saw that because I was like, oh my God, they actually, you know, there's some like very iconic panels like that in the comics that made it onto screen. Kind of like, so when he escapes from the hamster ball, as I'm going to keep calling it, and he goes into like that little kind of like portal to get back to the dreaming as well. Just stuff like little things like that. Yeah, it was just his performance really that kind of had me hooked the entire time. Like every time it cut away from him to like go back to like the other guys in the house, I was like, no, go back to him. I know he's not saying anything, but please just go back to him. I just want, like, I want to see this poor sad man. But yeah, that's what had me from like the get-go.
They know their audience.
Yeah, for sure. Sai, what about you?
So I really love that shot is actually one of my favorite shots and one of my favorite panels from the original comic book. One thing I will say about Sturridge's performance is, you know, in the comic book panel, there's, you know, Morpheus looks like he's been stunned, and you know the shot in the show, the way Sturridge plays it, there's a lot more vulnerability in that one moment than there is in the page, than what I remember from the actual comic book, right? And it's really interesting to see him. You know, like the test there is that everybody just wants him to talk, right? They're like, hey, give us the power. We know you've got the power. How long can you possibly wait? You know, even with the ruby and with the sand and all that stuff, they're just like, no, we know you have this power. If we just wait you out, we'll get it. And there's such a mix of like determination and sadness. And later on in the series, when you see how powerful you know, Morpheus actually is, how incredibly powerful he is, to think back on, you know, as a comic book reader, to know his level of power and to see him captured, that has you know, really deep meaning, that like even somebody at that power level can be taken down a notch. I think the other really interesting thing is one of my favorite parts from the comic books. It's not in in the show, because of the DC rights issue, is there's another character in DC called the Sandman.
Mhm.
He's a guy who wears a gas mask. He was a 1930s guy solving mysteries. So he's closer to a character like the Shadow than the Sandman that we see. And in the comics, one of the ways that Dream tries to get out is he tries to send out dreams to people. And the Sandman is sensitive to that. You know, the human Sandman is sensitive to that. And he starts to solve crimes with that power. He's never able to actually get to Dream. He's never able to actually get to Morpheus to get him out. And that would have been an awesome, like, you know, second episode to see like all the different kind of mini adventures that this other Sandman went on. But I really enjoyed it. I think they hooked me pretty quickly. I think the quality of the production design and just the overall style, and of course Charles Dance, you know, is great casting for Roderick Burgess. I think the casting overall is pretty spot on, as we'll see in other episodes. I think they did a wonderful job of getting exactly the right people to play the parts that needed to be played. Even the guards, the actors playing the guards were really good. Like, you could tell they were just like, what am I doing? I'm watching this naked guy. Like, this doesn't seem like a whole lot, you know. And I'm doing it in exchange for some vague sense of power, you know, as a part of the cult that I'm a member of. I think the cult was also sold very, very well.
Yeah,
Really cool stuff.
I agree. Yeah, no, that's really cool. So we talked a little bit about the cast. So let's talk about some of the characters that we like. We already talked about Corinthian, but you know what I was really surprised about? Cain and Abel. They picked a bunch of brown guys for Cain and Abel, and I was so happy. I thought that was so cool. Livy, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I love Sanjeev Bhaskar like so much. Like, he's very well known like over here in the UK. Like, even though I've not watched much stuff he's been in, like, I've known who he is like basically my entire life. And also like, my mum's actually Indian, so like there are some like actors and stuff that like always have good words spoken about them in our household. But he was so like, normally I see him in like very comedic roles, and even though like Cain and Abel are still very much like the comic relief, that it's still a very dark story between the two of them, because it's the first murderer and the first victim. Oh my god, I can never remember the name of the guy who plays Abel, but like, he was just so sweet. But yeah, I just, even though, like I said, even though it's like a bit of a dark story between the two of them, it's done in like a really funny, light-hearted way. But also, we got to talk about Gregory, guys.
Gregory!
No.
We had Gregory for all of 1 minute, and my heart still broke. I knew it was coming, but just seeing Dream almost cry, seeing the way Cain and Abel like turn their backs like to their master, basically, I was like, oh god, this is hurting way more than when I read it in the comics.
I know.
Yeah.
But
when the dog dies, like,
yeah, they were just so well done. Like, yeah, but would you guys go in the House of Secrets or the House of Mysteries? Which one?
Oh, Jazz, what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like I want to say House of Secrets, but that could also drive me crazy. So I'm gonna go with House of Mysteries, just so I can be surprised.
I'd go with House of Mysteries as well, but that's sort of because it speaks to the inner Sherlock Holmes fan in me. Like, okay,
Right.
what mystery is there? What kind of mystery is it? You know?
Right. If I know all the secrets, then I mean,
I think I gotta go House of Secrets. I'm ready to go nuts. So
wow, okay. I am ready for the House of Pizza. So Pizza Hut would be where I would be going. I don't know if you guys have those over there in the UK, but it's the House of Pizza. All right, Corinthian. Who else do we got? Oh, let's talk about his siblings. Who are his siblings? Let's go into detail about that a little bit, because they don't really cover it in the show as much, and we see a few of them. I think we maybe see all of them, but just for a little bit. Sai, you want to dive into that?
Sure. So Dream is a member of a group called the Endless, which basically represent, basically experiences and things that human beings and other sentient beings go through. So, humans dream, they think of stories. He's the kind of physical representation of that. Later on, we meet Death, his sister. Everything goes through death. As we know, everything has some sort of ending, and death is there whenever something has this ending. There's Desire, who we meet later in a later episode, who's kind of like a sort of a gender bending character, and that's all about dreams and desires that people have. There's Despair, who's another sister that kind of represents that sadness. We don't meet Delirium.
Okay.
We don't meet Delirium, and I don't think we meet Destiny either. So we don't meet all the members of the Endless. But basically, these are all characters that are kind of physical manifestations of things that human beings experience and go through, and they kind of have their own kind of squabbles. But at the end of the show, or in one of the later episodes, Dream talks about the fact that they're essentially meant to serve humanity, right? They don't exist without humankind. They actually, if a universe ends, they go back to and it starts again. Then they're back. They kind of exist outside of the realm of of humanity, and they're kind of watching, but also providing this sort of universal function. And that's kind of what makes the stories so interesting. And if you've read other work by Neil Gaiman, he's very interested in this idea of stories and of kind of gods and beings beyond humankind, and how they kind of interact with us and what that means. Later on, in the comic book series, you get to meet other characters that are, and also in the show as well. So you get to meet like Greek myths that have come to life. You get to meet Greek gods and other types of deities, and you get to see what that means in this universe, the way that he's kind of conceived of them as being a function of humanity, and in service to us in some ways.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that's really interesting the way you put it. But like, let's dive into Death, because for me that's one of the most interesting characters,
Oh, she
because
was
they get
amazing.
she got her own episode, and I thought that episode was phenomenal, one of the best ones they did. And you don't really understand who she is and figure out who she is. So when she's talking to the guy playing soccer and she's like, "I'll see you later," like we're like, "Oh, okay, now we know what she meant." That's not a good "see you later." And I thought it was done really well. And then you have to see like these different cultures, and how they deal with death. I know one of the guys that she killed or took with her was Jewish, right? And he read something called a Shiva, which is really interesting. It's like a declaration of their faith right before you die. And I was like, that's so interesting, because Muslims have that too. We have the Kalma where we read it before we die as an affirmation of our faith. And it was really cool to see how in depth our cultures are so linked. I thought that was interesting. Jazz, any thoughts about that?
That whole episode was just beautiful, because when we think of death, right, a lot of people are just like almost afraid of death. Like, we don't want to die. We don't want any of this, right? Her portrayal of death was like, yo, it happened. Let me help you as much as I can and help you guide you through this process. And it was just masterfully done, because everyone, like, even when people were scared, right? They like that one guy who drowned. He was like, "No, I need to go back. I need to be with my wife. We just got married." But
Yeah.
then within like minutes, he's already accepted it, and then she's helping, guiding him all the way through. And so, whoever this actress was, it was Kirby. I cannot remember her last name.
Kirby Howell
Baptiste.
Baptiste.
Yeah, she did a fantastic job with this.
Yeah, and that death was the one that got me. I was like, oh no, not him. Oh no, but the baby too.
The
All of
baby one
them.
is way worse in the comics.
Oh yeah,
Like,
much
Oh.
worse.
they basically, what we got in the show is essentially half of what it was in the comics. She kind of like lingers with the baby a little bit more, and kind of has a little bit of a conversation with the baby too. It's a bit weird, but I was like, I'm kind of glad they kind of like cut down on that one, because that one was like hard enough to read and watch at the same time. I sobbed so much, and I watched that episode, I have to say. I remember watching it with my friend when it dropped for the first time. We were both kind of like holding back tears. We were just like sniffling quite a lot. And then the second time I watched it, I was like openly bawling. And then the third time it was actually like the Sandman, what they did, a watch party for it, like Neil, Kirby, and all them lot, you know, Ferdinand Kingsley. And so it was just like everyone in the chat was like cool sobbing now, and I was just sitting at my desk like watching it like, oh my god, why did I join in with this? But no,
they wanted to get pictures of all of you sobbing so they can bribe you later. That's the only
Thankfully,
explanation.
none of us had cameras on. It was just the chat, the stream chat just going absolutely wild. But like, also interesting, Neil Gaiman is Jewish as well. So that's, you know, if you didn't know that, that's why that character exists within that universe. So I think that was like quite important to him to have that in there. But also, Sai, you forgot one of the Endless in your list.
Did I forget one of the
You forgot Destruction.
Oh, Destruction. That's right.
Because they refer to him as the prodigal in the Sound of Her Wings episode, in the Death episode, because he's missing as well, and no one's heard from him, and that's actually quite like an important plot point for like everything. It would be like a season 2 kind of situation, like ongoing from season 2. It's so funny because like everything that happens after like what would be season 1 of the Sandman show, like what happens from that point onwards in the comic, that's all season 2 stuff. Like that's where the actual plot line begins. This is just like a prologue to all of that. That's where the storyline starts, you know.
It's like Rogue One all over again, where they just made a whole series out of like 3 lines of dialogue.
Well, I think this is actually more about like how deep the story actually is. We haven't even really gotten to, and it's funny we're talking about this now, and you know, sorry everybody, totally forgot about Destruction. Maybe I don't want to be destroyed, but you know, so when you think about the real meat of Morpheus' story, they haven't gotten to that yet. They hinted at a couple of things about his past relationship, his son. There's a whole other series of things that happen between the Endless that we would only get to in season 2, but that make up a good portion of you know, the comic book series. So the comic book is actually an interesting mix of like kind of long form storytelling, and then some of these snapshot stories like Calliope that you saw at the end of the at the end of this season, which made it like really a very cool comic book to read, because there was so much that was unexpected. You know, even if you had like these consistent storylines like Dollhouse or others, there was always something else that could happen, because he's the king of dreams. You can take a, you know, one issue little side story and go in a completely different direction, totally different style, and it makes the comic really pop.
Okay. Yeah, I can't say much to that, but okay. So we talked about one episode that was like a self-contained episode. Let's talk about the other episode. There's a self-contained episode, which is the one that really is like, I was watching this episode at the gym, and I legit went, "Oh,
that was a mistake."
I was on the treadmill, and I literally fell off because I was like, "What just happened?" Like, oh my god! And I took a picture of me, like, at the gym with my reaction, because I was like, this is not just happened. So it's the episode obviously with at the diner, where everyone, you know, starts telling the truth, and then starts getting a little turned on, and then starts killing each other. A little bit of everything happening there. So who wants to take this one? Who wants to dive into this episode?
Well, I did start off this whole episode of talking how that was one of my favorite episodes, so let's dive right in. This episode starts off with, you know, what was his name? The old
John
guy.
D.
Yeah.
John
So
D.
he has the ruby at this point. He walks into this diner. He's like, yeah, let's just have some fun. Let's see what happens when people's dreams come true. Oh no, Rosie! Bye. You know, Rosie's been in the chat. We've been talking. He's been putting some great commentary there, like always. So take care, Rosie. Thank you for joining us. But yes, back to the episode of the diner, right? And so, as Neebz said, this is an episode where people, you know, kind of, sort of
Lose their inhibitions.
and then just go right at it. And I'm like, oh my god. Oh, we're allowed to spoil, right? Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's the waitress, there's the couple with the inferiority complex,
couple.
the power couple. There's the lesbian girl who's struggling with her romance, and then
the cook
in the back, right? And oh my god, like how
and
everyone
the guy
was
going for the interview.
the interview,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
The interview guy.
yes, the nervous one, right? Oh my god. Like everyone's inhibitions, and oh my god,
this could have been a play, and like I feel like it would be on Broadway and people would cheer for it. It'd be crazy.
right? It's like there was so much going on, like every emotion possible just happened there. Olivia, what do you think?
It's one of my favorite episodes too. Yeah, like it's the one bottle episode that I'll forgive. Basically,
Yeah.
that is essentially what it is. It was a bottle episode, but it was a bottle comic to a degree as well, because I just we got like, firstly I want to talk about David Thewlis as John Dee. Before casting even happened, and I was reading the comments, I was like, if they do not cast David Thewlis as John Dee, they're doing something wrong, because I had just watched him in Fargo and he was disgusting in that, and I was like, he plays it a little bit too well. So I was like, I think he'd be pretty good as John Dee, doing all this really weird kind of gross stuff to other people, manipulating them with the ruby and all that. But it was such like a fascinating character study of an episode as well. And it's just the way the tension builds up with every conversation that's going on, and the way they all kind of slowly start to like interlink, and then they all start like making out and all the other stuff, and then start hurting themselves and killing each other. And one thing that I did notice that they didn't put in from the comics, and I totally understand why, because the amount of people that said that when they read that comic for the first time, they were traumatized. I remember being on like a WhatsApp video call with my friend who hadn't read the comics in a while, but she was like, I need to see your reaction to 24/7. I was like, okay. And it was just the way my face was just dropping like as time went on. But the bit that I'm glad they didn't put in, trigger warning a little bit, but then again, like we're talking about the diner episode, like I think that's just sort of a given at this point. But basically, the TV in the corner that John's sitting, like in the episode, by the time it's almost over, he's just sitting there eating ice cream, watching the TV, watching them. But there's a bit earlier on in the comics where it focuses on the TV, and it's just this entire page of the TV, and it's a kids show, and basically it's showing how John's influence with the ruby is actually also affecting the outside world, but he's personally controlling everybody in the diner to like do what he wants, but he's letting that control kind of like he lets it go in the outside world. And basically it's a kids TV show, and there's a guy with a hand puppet, and he's like, he's like making the puppet talk, and then he goes towards the end, he's like, well, it's time for the puppet to shut up now, or worse, and just gets out a knife. And you just see it kind of go, and then the broadcast stops, and it's implied that he like cuts off his own hand that has the puppet on to like make it stop talking.
Wow.
And they did not put that in the show whatsoever.
I can see why they would not.
I totally get that. Like, in the Q&A at the premiere, they were like, oh yeah, like this is like the most traumatic episode. And I was like, oh my god, they've really gone and put everything in, haven't they? They did it. Like, okay, they understood where to like dial it back for like a TV audience, for like a brand new audience, which was like really good. But yeah, I wasn't as horrifically traumatized as I thought I would be. I was still very much like, I need to go and have a shower to cleanse myself after watching it, because it does make you feel so icky. I don't but it was just so well done. It's the snap of tension when they start like killing each other and hurting each other, and the way they have the three women kind of be the three fates as well. I always loved that so much. It was just so like well done.
So Rosie's asking, can we talk about how they changed the appearance from the comic to screen? Apparently he was very shadowy in the comics, but then in the show he was like, he was there. He was an actual character there.
Yeah,
I mean, like in the comics, he was literally in Arkham Asylum, like pretty much wasting away. And also naked. Like he was
Okay.
naked and had like a cape.
Yeah.
So obviously because they had to get rid of the whole DC kind of thing as well. And you kind of keep it relatively PG, and also I don't think anybody really wants to see David Thewlis with his dick out, to be quite honest.
Wait
Oh,
a minute.
yeah.
Wait a minute. I don't know. I don't know. You can't speak for everybody.
But like, they had
Jazz
to make
has left the
some
chat.
appropriate changes.
That's funny. But Reddy just said the fates were tasty. They did, even the fates were
Yeah.
tasty. I saw that.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting too. But I do want to go back to, like, you're talking about stuff that like was too much for it. I feel like the scene where he tells the waitress what he was doing to her son, there was way too much of a gap when he said it to when they revealed the age. Because there was like a good minute where I was horrified when I heard that. Like, they did that on purpose. That was creepy.
Yeah,
That was too much.
they did that. They definitely
Yeah.
did that on purpose.
It was 100% shock value there. Like my jaw dropped in that
Oh
minute.
my
I was like,
God.
oh my God, did they
And
just
it
do this on
wasn't
TV?
shock for shock's sake, like how a lot of TV shows are nowadays. But again, this one does have the benefit of it being adapted from something else.
Right.
And it was, like I said, it was a character study, and it was to showcase how messed up John D is, that he thinks that like if people are honest and don't have their and like give in to all their inhibitions, the world's going to be a better place because it's great. It is better for people to be honest, but not like that honest.
Yeah.
But he didn't care.
Yeah.
He didn't care. He was just chilling, eating his ice cream.
But like,
well, it's funny. He's the only one that's not really honest in the episode, right? Like he's projecting all of these feelings. He's kind of, he thinks everybody else is a liar. He doesn't see anybody. He doesn't even see himself as being in any way dishonest because, forcing people to, speak in a way that they normally wouldn't, is that really honesty? And, speaking without consideration for another person, without caring about, the other person's reaction, or even when the right time would be to say something, it isn't really honesty. It sometimes it's just causing pain. And that's the truth of John D. That's what he really wants. He wants to inflict pain, as much pain as he can, but he can't be honest about that. So he's just forcing everybody else to be quote unquote honest.
That's true. That's true. Because there is a saying that like honesty without kindness is just cruelty, right? And that's what he's basically doing, being cruel to these people. But one of the things that I really liked about that scene is the built up to that scene, because we see that on the drive over with the nurse, I believe she was. I forgot what she was. No, she was just a stranger that he met on the road, right?
Yeah, she was just the driver. Yeah.
And that tension in that driver's seat was so great. And you could see her thinking about like what to do, but he knows what she's about to do. So it's kind of like this scary built up tension where they kind of just, you're like, what are they thinking? Who is thinking this? Who is thinking that? What did you guys think of that scene?
It felt like a test.
Oh, I thought that was incredible. I really think that in a very short period of time, they make you care about this woman, because you don't really know anything about her, but you know that he's dangerous, you know that he's scary. And Thewlis does this thing in the show. He's done it in other shows as well, but where he seems kind of unassuming, but then he, under his performance, can include just these, he can make like a common statement, and then he says something to her about her dog, but it it's supposed to be kind of nice, I guess, but then you're like, that didn't seem nice at all.
Yeah, you think the dog's going to be in danger. Like he says something about her, and you're like, oh God, what's going to happen to the dog?
Yeah, it's like I'm not ready for that.
No,
and then somehow it gets worse when you actually get to the diner, and those inhibitions are kind of revealed. I also think that this is it's interesting. This episode is a little bit of a precursor, and like I can see like a thematic connection to going to the convention, to the serial convention later on, where all of those people are kind of, they're letting out their own inhibitions in a bunch of horrible ways. And you can see that this is like sort of the impact of Dream's power being let loose into the real world, into the waking world, without anybody kind of, keeping it in check, so to speak. So with the Corinthian running around, there's all sorts of things that are happening that normally wouldn't. It's pushing people into this other direction. With the Ruby and other elements of Dream's power, it really has this impact of allowing people to be their worst selves. right? Like, Roderick Burgess, when he got the power of Dream, he didn't suddenly become a better person. He just became a cult leader, right? So there's this sense that there are powers that are beyond human hands for a particular reason.
Yeah, Liv. Well, what did you think of this scene with the drive?
Oh my god, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, it's so funny because obviously I've read the comics. I know how, I mean, it turns out very differently for the lady in the comics.
Oh no.
Yeah, he actually kills her.
Which
Oh.
that's what we were expecting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but
R.I.P.
I think I know Neil did speak about why they changed that recently, but I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's definitely spoke about why they made that change. And it makes sense within the context of things, but like, yeah, just both of them, like David Thewlis and I can't remember the lady's name who plays her either, but they were just both really like, you're just hooked. You're just so like you're clenching your teeth, kind of like in paranoia. Just watch them. Like, is he going to do something to her in the car? Is he going to do something to the dog? And then they get to like the gas station. And it's like, okay, this is her chance to get away. Doesn't really work out, but he still lets her go anyway. And because he was like, well, you were honest. You were always honest. And
that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
And
she was the only. She was the only like nice person who was honest, kind of thing, which kind of then sets off his whole other thing at the diner, which is like really interesting. But
I also think it's because she said something that really resonated with him, because I think she said something about like people do this because they're selfish, and she goes, no, they do it because they're scared. And he's like, never thought of it that way before. So it's kind of interesting how it made him kind of think. Might be the reason he let her live and gave her the good luck charm or whatever it was. Right?
This is funny.
So really, the diner episode is her fault. That's,
yes.
Everything that happens in the diner 100%. Is really her fault.
It was just that whole drive, and that conversation gave him way too much to think about.
Never pick up hitchhikers, guys. It ruins the.
That's a rule. That's a rule. No, I'm reading the Tumblr post. It was a Q&A that Neil Gaiman did about this scene. He changed it because he didn't want people to be like, oh, I know what's going to happen next. He changed it just to mess with people.
I love that.
10 out of 10.
King.
He definitely did that with me because I knew that she was supposed to bite it in the comics, and then I'm like, wait a minute, she's alive? What? So
gotta
you win this
guessing.
round, Neil.
Damn, you knew. Okay, so one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, which was kind of wild, was like there is this story with the vortex, and we're going to talk about the serial convention too, because that is my favorite part. That is just hilarious. But you have this person who went into a spell when she fell asleep. So she was supposed to be the vortex. She did not get to be the vortex. Her granddaughter became the vortex. And then her granddaughter is now looking for her little brother. And when we find the little brother, he's kind of been taken care of by another nightmare, I believe. What are your thoughts all the way up till there, Livy?
God, I won't lie, like the way they did the doll's house, I feel like the pacing was a bit off. I still really enjoyed it, but I was just kind of like, it really slowed down up until like the convention kind of thing. And obviously like they changed a few of like the character relationships as well. So like Rose Walker and Lyta Hall weren't friends in the comics. Lyta was like in the show, she was dreaming about her dead husband. But in the comics, she's basically been like living in that dream for like a really long time, and it's not necessarily related to Rose being the vortex or anything like that. But it was I just remember like the reveal about like how Rose sort of became the vortex, because it was meant to be Unity, and then obviously Unity got the sleepy sickness, and
yes,
it was Rush at the end. That's right.
And then like you find out that the entire like thing with like Rose being the vortex was like a plot formed by Desire, so that they could you know, just off Morpheus basically, because this, like, the sibling rivalry, man, the fact that the entire plot of Doll's House stems from sibling rivalry in the Endless is just insane. Is literally just insane to me. It's like, damn, these guys have been around for so long and they're still this petty with each other. Like, you think that the Endless would have learned to, like, just not mess with each other by now, you know?
Yeah.
So the fact that, like, that entire thing only happened because Desire was like, you know what? I want to mess with my brother.
There's no cost to them though. Like, they can't exactly die.
No, they're not. It's like it's a thing where, like, if an Endless destroys another Endless or blood of the Endless, it means that they then have to pay the price as well, which is usually they get offed as well, and someone else has to then take up their sort of like mantle, so that you know, anthropomorphic representation of whatever concept they are can continue on and still work. But yeah, like, the rules of the Endless are kind of like, oh, okay, it's a bit rough.
Yeah, I thought, because the thing is, like, I'm gonna be real. The reason why I love this season so much, I didn't know this was going to be a plot. I thought when John D died, that was the end of the story, and then a brand new story starts up. But turns out this was the real story the whole time. This is why Endless was captured. Why Morpheus was captured. All this happened to make a baby with Unity so that he could kill her and then he could die. Yo, that's the law game. That is the middle finger shit from Game of Thrones. I thought that was a solid plot, man. I like it. I thought it was great. What about you, Jazz?
Bro, that assault in the hospital thing did not sit well with me.
I mean,
like, I can see this, like, in the show, like, obviously it's designed to, like, move the plot along, but I was just like, oh my god, this was just brushed over. Like, why are people not upset about this? Like,
I mean,
it was not okay.
It's probably in the source material, right? It's probably something people expected.
Yeah, it is, but, like, I was expecting more of an outrage from people, like, just online, and I did not see that. People just
kind of glossed over in the comics as well because of the way Unity reacts to it, being like, oh, my man with the golden eyes. And then it's like, okay, so it technically wasn't a consensual thing, but the way she talks about it, it's like she was aware it was happening. It's like it's a really weird, like,
she's
really,
aware.
it's such a weird area with the way, like, Unity talks about it and then, like, what actually happened. But yeah, you're right. Like, I was like reading it, I was like, well, not people, like, not more, like, you know, outraged about it. And then I see, like, no one do you know what's interesting though? Do you know what people are mad about? Hob Gadling being a slave owner. People picked up on that and ran ran with it. So when I made a tweet that Neil retweeted, and I was like, okay, like, me being half Indian, from my family being from a specific area of India, seeing Ferdinand Kingsley, who is also from, you know, that era, means a lot to me. And someone was like, oh, so it means a lot to you that, like, this man played, like, a slave owner. And I was like, it's mentioned as an offhand comment, and, like, what, but, like, yeah, people ran with that about Hob Gadling, but, like, just ignored what Desire did to Unity.
Yeah,
Livy, that is the most, like, that is the most Twitter response that I can ever imagine. Because, like, you wrote one thing, and then somebody just came in with something totally different and said, well, it seems like you're okay with slavery now, aren't you?
Literally, that's what it was like. And I was like, thankfully, that was, like, only one person who said that, and I just blocked them. Everyone else was just sort of like, oh my god, that's so nice. And I was like, yeah, right. But I was just like, it is the most Twitter thing to happen. It was like, oh, okay, so we're just going to ignore the lack of consent from Unity. We're all just chill with that, apparently. Cool, fine.
Yeah, that we could draw the line at a fictional character owning slaves.
It's that
and you appreciating the actor for it.
Yeah, it's like that thing from Community, isn't it? It's like, I can deal. Well, you reword it. It's like, I can deal with the lack of consent, but I draw the line at, like.
Yeah, so no. The quote is, I can excuse the racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
Yeah, but then it's like, if you pop it in, like, in the context of this, like, I could excuse the lack of consent, but I draw the line at what Hob Gadling did, and it's like,
right.
I think it's also that story with Desire taking, you know, and basically using Unity I think that's a very strong contrast to how Dream and Morpheus treats his job, right? Like he's really serious about it. He, even though he doesn't really seem that like cuddly and fuzzy, he genuinely cares about people, right? He wants things to work well with them, and he genuinely cares about the stories, and he's capable of that genuine care. That's part of the reason that we have the Hobgaddling story in both the comic and in the show. That's also an episode that I really loved, which I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did, because I love the comic book stories so much.
Yeah.
But when one of the Endless doesn't do the right thing and decides to treat humans as playthings, this is the result. You have, somebody not really realizing that, something's been done to them because they're overpowered, overwhelmed. And it takes another one of the Endless to, correct that mistake later on. In this case, Morpheus.
Yeah. No, the other thing that I want to talk about, we talked about, the baby and consent and stuff like that. There was another baby that happened that kind of just took me out. And like, this woman is having a relationship with her dead husband in a dream, and she gets pregnant. Like, Livy, what's up with that?
I'm pretty certain part of that, like, is to do with Rose's power, as like the vortex, like can make things reality. But like, oh my god, it's because the way Dream is like, I'm gonna come back for the kid, and everyone was like, okay. But no, the kid is important for plot later on down the line. That's the thing. This is what I'm saying. Like this entire stuff, like this entire season of stuff that we've seen, it's set up for like everything that happens later on. Because like characters from Doll's House come back as well, which is super fun. Barbie and Ken, I think it is, mostly Barbie that comes back.
Yeah, Barbie comes back.
But yeah, a few of those characters come back. Obviously, we see way more of the Endless later on, and then you sort of get to know those guys a bit more. But yeah, I know a lot of viewers were kind of like, what is the deal with this baby, and why is Dream being so creepy about it? And all us comic book readers are like, just you wait. It's gonna get real sad.
All right, I'm excited. I'm excited to see that. Almost as excited as I was for a cereal convention with no cereal. Let's dive into that. Jazz, you want to go into that part?
That scene was so cute with the kid like, "Hey, where's all the cereal?" And Corinthian just looks at him like, this is an actual plot problem for our whole convention. If somebody was to like casually walk by, it's a cereal convention that actually is no cereal. This might be an issue later on. It took a little kid for them to realize this after how many conventions they've done, God knows. But it was a really funny point to a really scary and gruesome concept.
It did bring some levity into this entire show, because now it's kind of like, oh, this misunderstanding between Corinthian and the kid. He doesn't know what's going on. He's being a silly kid. It's almost like a Home Alone situation. I thought it was a great way to kind of break up the crazy stuff that we were seeing in just a few episodes ago, and kind of just give us some levity in this, but still being like a murder ground, because people are still getting murdered. Sai, you want to talk about this episode?
So I really enjoyed this episode. I also, I kind of love the way they weaved in Rose's brother into everything, and kind of dropped him in with the Corinthian, and kind of led them to the cereal convention. And I love the fact that this kid was like constantly in danger, right? Like when he goes up to I'm blanking on his name now, but the child killer,
Funland.
Oh, yeah,
that's right.
Funland.
Yeah, like you're just like, oh, he escaped. Oh, no, he didn't. And I also found it very, very funny, the fact that there's this jockeying of positions about, no, you can't kill this kid. He's with me. I'm the Corinthian. But it was also a really interesting examination of what having a nightmare walking around in the waking world, what it caused. That people knew of the Corinthian, they were inspired by him, and a lot of the worst impulses of these individuals were allowed to come out because of that. And I really liked the way it was shot. I enjoyed when Rose finally shows up. And I kind of love the cat and mouse there. The tension in the episode is really impressive. And I actually loved seeing all the different, types of serial killer, the good doctor, being a not so good doctor, right? I mean, as a Daisy, I want all the doctors to be good, right? But this was a really good episode. It was really it really kept me on the edge of my seat, and I was really impressed. Especially, I knew it was going to happen, and I still found myself getting caught up in the story, just because the performances are so good. Boyd Holbrook has such good chemistry with everybody else on the show that every scene with him having conversations with other serial killers, it really pops. And he does such a good job with flipping back and forth between the Corinthian being like above it all, but also being a little petty about finding the guy who's not really a serial killer, and also kind of taking advantage of that situation to kind of satisfy his own lusts on multiple levels. So it was a really great episode.
Yeah, Livy, what are your thoughts about that episode? Because the way it ends is pretty interesting.
Oh my god, like the amount of like mini heart attacks I kept having in that episode. One of my favorite moments is obviously when Rose and Gilbert arrive and Gilbert sees the Corinthian and is like, nope, and just leaves. It was so good. It was just so funny. But like, I will say my main critique of the serial convention episode is I didn't mind like the sort of build up they put into it of like trying to with the convention organizers trying to get the Corinthian in. The one thing that they could have done without was like having Funland being one of the people helping like as part of that conversation for organizing it, because oh my god, in the comics you get introduced to him and he's just like talking and it seems so innocent because at this point you're kind of like, are we at like a weird serial killer thing, because you're not really sure. And then you start to realize, and you hear him talking, and you're like, "Oh my god, he like kills kids specifically." And I think like that whole bit that little monologue he does in the show is literally straight from the comics. I'm like, I wish they hadn't introduced him so like a couple of episodes earlier, because then that would have hit like so much better. And like we could have done without the whole like, oh yeah, the waiter looks younger than 17 kind of thing. That's like my main critique of it, because Funland is like an inherently the most out of everyone at that convention is inherently the worst out of all of them, because he hurts and kills kids. So whenever like and Jed and Rose are like running away and then they think they're safe and then they run into him, me and my friend actually were like, no, we were like yelling. We're like, no, and then we'll see the Corinthian comes in and like kills Funland and we were like, great, but run away from
That's so funny.
There were so many instances we were just like, oh my god, like literally just yelling at my TV when we first watched it. Like you're really rooting for Rose and Jed, because you're like, just get out, please, just run. Like, oh man, but yeah, I just
the layers of tension were amazing.
About it,
it really was amazing. There was a lot of tension there. All right, all right, we're almost running out of time, but there are only 2 more episodes that I want to talk about. One, I didn't really care for that much, but maybe you guys can see my mind. The other is one is Cats, and the other is The Author with the Muse. I loved that one. That one was amazing. The whole story with the Muse and how they integrated Sandman into that story, and you learn about a little bit of history. I thought that episode was really, really great. So let's start off with that one. Livy, what are your thoughts on that episode?
Oh my god, I mean, I love both of them. I love the Cats one and I love the Calliope one, because like they both very much carry the themes of what the show is about how like dreams shape our reality and how we tell stories and all that kind of stuff, which is really great. And obviously with the Calliope one you get like the backstory with like her and Dream. But what was really, I'm always just going to keep coming back with like the comic book comparisons, I'm sorry, but like what was so interesting to me is how they actually started out with Richard Maddock being a little bit more of a sympathetic character, because in the comics he's just straight up an arsehole. Like he goes to Erasmus Fry's house and is like, yeah, just, you know, give us me, and then immediately like assaults her when he gets home. But in the show, they made it so he was like very reluctant to even consider hurting her, but then obviously he gets so stuck in his own head and is like, no, I want the fame, I want my books to do well, that he just goes and does it anyway. Like it was kind of like a breaking point situation for him, rather than him just straight up being like an absolute dick, which I found very interesting. But Arthur Darvill played that so well, and it was actually like such a nice surprise to like see him in that, because obviously like me being like a big Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, we got Rory. We got Jenny Coleman and we got Rory.
Clara was also my favorite companion, but like I loved that whole Matt Smith era as a whole. So like seeing Arthur Darvill like in Sandman, I was like, oh my god, great! Like we got the whole gang,
the whole squad's back, right?
Squad's back. But yeah, I found that like really interesting how they played him more sympathetic, and just like towards the end as well, when Calliope, you know, writes out for Morpheus and then he burns it and it still summons him anyway.
Yeah.
It's just that moment where he's just sitting so calmly at Richard Maddox's desk and then just stands up, and he doesn't raise his voice. That's the thing. Yeah. He doesn't like get angry in like the traditional sense of what we expect to be angry. It's just the way he was like, if it is ideas you want, then you shall have them in abundance. Like it's just a little pause before he says in abundance. And I'm like, oh, well, this man now knows that he has messed up big time, hurting this man's ex-girlfriend. Not that he knew it was his ex-girlfriend, but like he messed up big time. I just thought it's so.
That's the last person's ex-girlfriend you want to mess with.
Moment, you know.
It was an appropriate punishment. I'll give it that. Like, what better way to drive somebody insane than by the one thing they've always wanted? Like, just. Cherry on top, like.
Sai, what about you?
So I really, you know, number one, I love Arthur Darvill, big Doctor Who guy. So I really enjoyed his performance is good, and I actually think one of the things I enjoy about comic book adaptations are some of the left turns that the comic book adaptations take. And Livy's absolutely right. In the comic, Richard Maddox is like within like 3 pages, he's assaulting Calliope. So there's no nuance. There's nothing else there. But this really, you know, made it seem like, oh, he had talent. And if he had just like worked harder or put in a little bit more effort, he might have been able to produce a similar work. He didn't need to do what he did, which makes, I think, the story much more damning for him, and makes me, you know, feel like, oh, the punishment totally fits. And then the other interesting difference in the comics, there's little things in the panels that show you when Morpheus is mad or when he's exhibiting power, and those are usually like panels of like big black, you know, energy coming out. He's real emo, so you know, there's a lot of that, and Sturridge doesn't have the benefit necessarily of all that shadow play or all that artwork, but he's able to use his voice, use his posture, use his positioning to kind of, you know, illuminate that in the same way. So you get the same vibe. You know, Arthur Darvill is or Richard Maddox is fucked, but you are not 100% sure what's going to happen until he says in abundance. And I really love the conversation that Morpheus and Calliope have at the end, because that conversation really felt like, oh, these people have known each other for a really long time. They have a history together, and you can see both why they care about each other, but also why that relationship didn't work out, and why it didn't last between the two of them, right?
Morpheus had a few relationships because he was also in hell, and he met someone he was talking there. Turned out he turned into a black man, and that was out of nowhere. Is there a little more?
Got to play.
So that lady he was speaking to was called Nada, and she was a queen. There is a singular comic storyline. It's a very short story, and it's basically about it's set somewhere in Africa, I'm assuming, about like this kind of like little tribe, and like how this dad goes to take his son, and he's like, okay, once I tell you the story, you're going to become a man, and no one else is going to know what this story is, but you're going to tell it to your son when you have one. And he goes into this story about how like there was a city that was like prospering really well and all that kind of stuff, and Queen Nada kind of like ruled over it, but she didn't have like a husband or anything like that, because she found there wasn't really anyone suitable for her. And then like one night, like Morpheus kind of like comes to her or something like that. It's been a while since I've read this one, but basically like Morpheus kind of like shows up or whatever, and they kind of have a bit of a thing, but she kind of understands like who he is and is like, no, this isn't appropriate. But then they still kind of like end up sleeping together. And then like things kind of start going wrong. And even though Morpheus like wants her to become like queen of the dreaming or whatever, she's like, no, I can't, like things are going wrong. I should never have been with you kind of thing. I can't be with you. And she tries to kill herself or something like that. And he kind of stops her from doing so and instead sends her to hell. So that's like what that is all about. Essentially punishing her for not being with him, which is like super interesting, because earlier on you were saying about how like Morpheus has a lot of like compassion for human beings, but the thing is he wasn't always like that. Another like inherent theme to like the story of Sandman is about how everyone is capable of change, and whether or not they choose to change in like a good way or a bad way, and like accept that they're going to develop as a person. So obviously when we meet Morpheus at the start of the show, he is very closed off. He just wants revenge for like what happened to him. And like the turning point for him is the Sound of Her Wings episode with Death. And he understands like, you know what, he's got his responsibilities. He needs to make things right. And that's when you kind of start to see him caring a bit more. That's why they incorporated the Hob Gadling storyline into that episode. And it just shows that like over time, he has grown a bit more compassionate. And because he's gone through some shitty things, that starts to make him like reevaluate like what he's done in the past. And the thing with Nada comes up again. Literally, it would be a season 2 thing, but it gets brought up at like the endless family dinner. And like, you know, I'm not going to spoil it, but like something happens to sort of like make him reconsider what he did, basically, to show that like he can change. And that's why with like even with Calliope, like even though they were both aware that things ended kind of badly between them, you know, the whole like she was surprised, you know, you came, and he was like, well, you called. It's like he still loved her so much, like he loved her so much, he still loved Nada so much, but it was just like certain parameters of things. Whereas with like Calliope, it was clear that he could sort of forgive her, and he wasn't gonna leave her to be like constantly more abused by Richard Maddox. Like the first opportunity he got, like he went and saved her, basically. So yeah,
that's a thing. Like he does grow through the show, because even with the episode with Hob, right? He was like insulted that this man could be like, "Hey, you keep me around because you need a friend," and he was like, "No, I am Dream of the Endless. I don't need friends. I'm emo.
No new friends. No new
friends, right?" But then, like, after the one meeting they missed in 100 years, the next time they see him, like, he actually greets him as a friend. Like, he does grow, and I think that's a good thing that's happening throughout the entire show, is that he is growing. And I haven't read the comics, I'll be completely honest, but with the show, seeing him grow makes it interesting, because then I'm wondering, can desire grow? Can despair grow? Can all these other endless grow and become better for the world? But you know, we'll see. Season 2.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, that's all the episodes I want to discuss. We don't need to discuss the cat episode. I think we're
good. The cat episode was amazing. We are definitely talking about the cat episode.
All right. Let's talk about the cat episode. Go for it, Jazz.
So, I feel like people who hate the cat episode just hate animation in general.
I don't hate animation, but you know what? It did take me out for a second. You got all these episodes and then one random animation. So I would argue that maybe it did take me out a little, but I don't hate animation because of that.
But was it not a good episode?
Could have done that. There was no other way they could have done that episode. You know.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
It's shockingly like, you know, like I was saying about like the themes within the Sandman. Sorry, it's a very important one for. Like all the themes in the show. So I'm really like, I absolutely lost my shit when they like were like, oh, by the way, here's a bonus episode. You get a dream of 1,000 cats and Calliope. I was like, oh, the cats. Yeah. Also, fun fact, David Tennant and his wife voiced the owners of the kitten, and then Michael Sheen and his wife voiced the owners of the cat that had the kittens.
Oh, no way.
Aw.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
And then
Wait,
Neil is
So
the
we got
vulture.
David Tennant in this also? That's crazy.
Yeah. He's kind of just got pals that he just brings in on everything. But yeah, and then Neil was the vulture that greets the cat when she's on her way to go and see Morpheus. So it was really cool. There's just so many random British cameos in the episode.
So the episode basically means that if enough people dream it, it becomes a reality. So mankind is now in charge of the world simply because they dreamed it, and automatically the cats are gone. Like I think I had a hard time following that episode because
it's just
what?
it's basically just a metaphor. Like it's just a really massive metaphor and very oversimplified metaphor. But it's about how every person on this earth has a dream, and you can to do whatever it is you want to do. Everyone's got that dream. And it's like, okay, so are you going to act on it? Are you going to act on it and make it a reality? Or are you just going to let it stay a dream? That's the whole point of the Cats episode. So, but yeah, just very oversimplified and very quickly
I think if I watched the cat episode as a separate thing, not knowing it's connected to the entire season, I think it would have went down a little differently for me. Because I think I feel like it was a little jarring to watch all those episodes and get that high climatic thing, and then this episode. It kind of took me out a little bit. And I don't have.
What was jarring?
I don't have a problem with the episode. I thought it was really good, but I just it came out of nowhere for me. So I'm just like,
it's one of the.
It's interesting you say that because my sense of the comic is that some of the issues of the comic feel that way. Like they haven't adapted this, but there's a issue of the comic, issue number 50, called Ramadan. And I remember when I was reading the comic, I was like, wait, why are we in ancient Arabia? Why are we, and this was like a consistent feling of like, oh, here's a cool new
it becomes relevant later on. That's the thing, doesn't it? It's just little things like that because they're the one shots of the Sandman universe kind of thing. Oh, there's one shot we're not going to get though. The one with Rainey. Was that her name? The superhero who has the changing face and then death.
Yeah. I don't.
We can't get that because it's DC property.
They'll just make up another changing face character. Yeah, that's fine. It'll be Rainier instead of Rainy. Something else.
Try in Game of Thrones somehow. Make it the Faceless Man. Okay, easier, right?
Yeah, I definitely, I love the Cats episode. I remember loving the comic issue with this story as well. But in this, watching it again or watching it as a live action or animated adaptation, it made me think about a lot about what the themes of the show are, because if you bring nightmares into the world, terrible things happen, which is kind of a big theme of the whole season. And then the Cats episode, weirdly enough, made me think about Islam, because we do have a thing in Quran where Allah talks about, if you're not following the religion as a people, I'll replace you with a group that will. And it's interesting to think about it in the context of the Cats, where the Cats were dominant and then they got switched out. Yeah. But it's also really, I'm not going to get into any spoilers beyond season 1, but even things that you think of as being endless may not stay that way forever, right? There's always, if you think about things, in terms of change. By the way, Livia, I wish I had gotten a screenshot of the look you just gave me when I said that, because it's very funny.
It breaks my heart.
Right? Because things that you think of as being forever, there's always the only constant in the Sandman universe and in the show is some sort of growth, change, adaptation. And I think that's a really a good focus for the series, because the comic and the series are both interested in how stories create that change. It creates empathy. And if you think about somebody like Morpheus, who is almost without empathy, he's got feelings, but he has a hard time empathizing with anybody that he sees as below himself. So he's much more similar to the other members of the Dreaming. Once he has that experience in the hamster bowl, a lot of things change. And there's a ton of change that grows out of that, from not destroying a dream vortex like he normally would, coming up with alternative solutions, or going back and saving an ex-girlfriend that he normally would have thrown into hell if he had the opportunity or power to do so. There's a lot of changes that happen out of that, and I think that's a great lesson, from the show and also the comic.
Yeah. Well, Livy, what are your final thoughts about the show?
I just want to like go back to the cats thing. I saw this really great theory. So obviously, like, you see Morpheus also as a cat in that episode, and I saw this really great theory that the story Coraline could be part of the Sandman universe because of the cat that she speaks to. And but then that kind of like got me. It was like, okay, so Coraline could effectively function as like a Sandman one shot in a way. Like, Neil has not confirmed this at all. It's just a theory. But then I kind of like ran with it, and I was like, technically speaking, since the Sandman is about stories, every story that Neil Gaiman has ever written could function as something as part of the Sandman universe, especially because the Sandman was like one of the first, if not the first, like mainstream fictional story that he wrote and was published as that comic. And also, like, basically every main character, bar anything in the Anansi Boys, I would say, every main character that Neil Gaiman has written is basically like a self-insert of himself. It's like Dream is him, basically. Like, me and one of my friends constantly just like, oh, Dream's doing such a great cosplay of Neil Gaiman, right? Because like they dress the exact same. And then like Crowley in Good Omens, that's basically Neil, and then Aziraphale is Terry Pratchett. Is stuff like that. So I'm just like, oh my god, like, yeah, the whole Neil Gaiman universe, it all can connect it all to Sandman, which I think is a really fun thing to sort of think about. And Netflix, I'm on your doorstep. Renew it. I know it cost 15 million per episode. 15 million per episode, I know.
I definitely want to see more.
Things.
You're right. They haven't renewed it yet, and I don't know why.
No, they've only just got all the. I've been following. I've got Neil on Twitter notifications just in case he actually says. But he said recently that they finally got all the data, and they have to take into account that a lot of people didn't binge watch it, but watched it and let each episode sink in for like a day or two before moving on to the next. But like, it overtook Stranger Things as the #1 show.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if they do not renew it, but the thing is that they've hired back all the writers.
Netflix is
that's
like
what
that.
I know.
Netflix, if people don't binge it day one, for some reason that hurts the show, and they will cancel a good series because of it. It's the dumbest metric they have.
But then,
they have a way of looking.
They dropped that bonus episode, and everyone was on it like that. So it's kind of like, you've got
I think that's why they dropped the bonus episode the way they did, is because they probably saw that people would need time to digest the whole thing. And then to prove that this is a viral show that people will drop everything to watch, they dropped the episode 11, and everyone did drop everything to watch it.
Wait, hold on. The 2 episodes with the cat and Kalana Piggy were a bonus episode?
They were. They weren't part of the original season.
Oh, because I watched it late, so I watched them all in like one sitting.
Interesting.
That's why I didn't like the cast episode. That's why it was jarring to me, because I binged the whole thing. I thought they were all together.
Why are you throwing off the metrics there, bro?
Yeah, dude.
These numbers.
You're screwing stuff for us.
I'm the one person that binged it.
They dropped it like a couple of weeks after
the
main. Yeah, they dropped it just before, I think just around the end of August.
Oh, that would explain it.
But because it was really funny. I remember waking up one morning. I distinctly remember it was a tube strike, so I was working from home, and I woke up a little bit later, and it was like 7 a.m, and I scrolled through Twitter, and I could just see Netflix and Neil Gaiman tweeting loads of cat emojis, and I was like, "Don't do this to me! Do not do this to me right now!" And then they were just being like, "Ah, what would you say if we did, Dream of 1,000 Cats kind of thing?" And I was like, don't. And then like an hour later at 8 a.m, like British time, they were like, oh, here's a new episode, Dream of 1,000 Cats, and also Calliope is a 2-in-1 episode. And I was like, oh my god. And the best part is my flatmate was cat sitting as well, so I went with her to go feed the cats, and I was like, this is such a perfect day. Went and fed some cats, got back, logged on for work, and whilst I was working, I was just watching the episode.
Oh, that's
great.
funny. All right. That's really, really cool. Also, that makes a lot of things more clear to me now because I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, silly me. Okay. Well, listen, thank you guys for joining our episode. This is officially the longest episode we have ever done at an hour and 25 minutes. That's wild. So
Ooh.
thank you guys. This was such an exciting topic to talk about, and we covered just almost everything that actually happened. So we got a lot done. Before you guys go, let people know where they can find you, and if they have trouble, spell it out for them.
Oh, it's me.
it's
Okay.
Ladies first.
So yeah, you can find me on TikTok at Lady of the Internet, but elsewhere like Twitter and Instagram at Livy Edwards 97. But yeah, I mostly talk about lots of nerdy things, and I simp for a lot of fictional characters on TikTok. So if you really like that,
no, it's okay. I mean, Neebz and I are kind of the same way. So I'm pretty sure you are too. So it's okay.
Yeah, man. Listen, She-Hulk has awakened things in me that I did not know existed.
Hot green lady.
Oh no, it was a feat for him.
I don't know what was his reaction.
Oh, Sai, what about you? Where can people find you? And also, you want to mention your book one more time for people who don't know?
Sure. If I can be a total shill, you can check out Leaders Assemble, Leadership in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, written by myself and Dr. Gordon Schmidt, and strategically placed throughout the entire show. So, subliminally suggesting that you buy it. You can find me on Twitter at IOSY Islam. I don't really do much on Instagram or anyplace else, but you can find me on Twitter there. And then if you like Sandman and you like The Psychology of Work, my co-author, Gordon Schmidt, has written a couple of blog posts at our website, talentmetrics.io, about The Sandman and things like succession planning. How do you plan for when your leader's going to be gone? Or how do you make sure that Matthew, the Raven, knows what he's supposed to do when he replaces a Raven that's been taken out? So really nerdy stuff. So feel free to check it out or just tweet at me, and I'll be happy to talk about it with you.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited about that. That sounds like a cool read. I can't wait.
One thing I want to mention before we go, did y'all notice that Sturgis looks just like the lead singer of Green Day, Billy Joe Armstrong?
Who looks like one of my mates says he looks like Sid Vicious. And that he should play him in a biopic.
Yeah. Even though Green Day's not British, but
Yeah, I don't want to be an American idiot.
Yeah, so the lead singer looks just like Dream. But Dream's like way skinnier, so.
He kind of looked like an Edward Cullen to me when I saw him in the Pico.
And him and in real life, Tom Sturridge and Robert Pattinson are besties.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool. Well, speaking of besties, say bye to our besties because it was nice having you guys on the show, and we can't wait to have you guys back. And until next time, guys, Salaam, nerds.
Peace.